When we want to create a web page, we need to think about what we're trying to display and what's the best way to display it. So we can think of HTML and the HTML tags as our building blocks for the web page that we want to make. So let's get started by talking about what HTML is. HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language. It's a language that lets us tell browsers what the text that we're showing is supposed to be. It helps the browser understand the best way to show the information, and it can be used to design a web page and offer up information in the way that makes the most sense. So the items that we're using to build are called HTML tags. So a tag is an item that you'll see between two triangular brackets, and they usually involve keywords that tell the browser what this section is supposed to be. So an example would be a button tag, which when used will tell the browser to display a certain component as a button. A simpler item would be a paragraph tag, which tells the browser that this is a chunk of text. There's also an image tag, which can tell the browser this is going to be a picture, so display it that way for me. Okay? So the tags are used to organize the web page, and we're going to go ahead and talk about how things are organized. So there's an example on our website which shows the very basic layout of how we're handling HTML tags. So the first thing that you're going to see is the HTML tag itself. That's right up here. Let me just make that a bit smaller for you. Oh, okay, there we go. All right, so with the HTML tag, it's the containing tag for all of the HTML that we're going to be adding onto the page. So what this tag says is it tells the browser everything inside of here needs to be read. It needs to be used. Okay? Right inside of the HTML tag, there's going to be two different tags that may make some sense to you. There's one called the head and one called the body. The point of the head is to contain things like libraries or meta information or things that can be used to help tell the browser how to interpret the information we're giving it. You don't need to worry too much about that at the moment, but the title tag that you see inside of here, this one is what gives us our information at the top in the tab area up here. That's where we can set that kind of information. That's called the title. The body contains the content for the web page. So everything else that we're going to be showing on the page needs to be held inside the body. So some examples here is H1, which stands for heading 1. And the way that these tags work is you have an opening tag, as you can see here, H1, and then the information that we want to be displayed as a heading, and then the closing tag, which starts with the bracket and then the slash, and then the closing tag. So the reason that we have these opening and closing tags is so that the browser understands everything within these two parts needs to be considered as a heading, right? Or in this section where it's a paragraph, everything between this opening tag and the closing tag, that's all part of that paragraph. It's the way that the browser can understand how this information is meant to be displayed. Now, that being said, there are some tags that do not have an opening and closing tag. Now, those can happen when we have things like images or other content where we're not really putting any text in between. We're just having an item to be shown. Okay? So what we're going to do now is we're going to go through an example and we're going to add some tags together. The first thing I want to do, though, is show you what we're aiming to do. So we're going to build this page here together. So keep this page in mind. And we're going to move over to Codepen. So before we actually get started, I want to discuss what Codepen is and how we're going to use it. So Codepen lets us type in some code and it will render the result down here at the bottom for us. This is really useful for us as we're learning, as we can immediately see our changes reflected. An example of that would be if I typed hello world and waited for it for a second, and we can see it down here at the bottom. Okay? One other thing to note is that the way that Codepen is operating is that everything in here is being put into the body of the HTML. So if we just switch tabs here, remember we saw this earlier, right? We had HTML and then HTML closing tag. We had the head and then the head closing tag, the body and the body closing tag. Just to refresh your memory, that's what we saw right here. Remember? Okay. So when we're in here, you may notice there's a little error or information item down here, which when we click on it, gives us some insight. Oh, it went away. Okay, well, the insight that it was going to tell us was that we shouldn't be including the head in this section here. Because of the way that Codepen is designed, we do not need to include the HTML tag or the head tags in this section. So we're actually going to go ahead and just remove that. You don't need to worry too much about why, but just understand that at the moment we won't be using it in Codepen. All right, so I'll remind you that our goal here was to build this page here. So let's go ahead and get started on that. So the first thing I want to do is add in the text that we saw without any of the tags. So let's go ahead and do that. So remember that the dog's name is Benji. He's looking for a family. We're going to have some information about him, like what kind of dog he is and how old he is, and the fact that he likes peanut butter, and that he is going to protect you from squirrels. And then lastly, we want to remind the person reading it that Benji would love to start playing soon. So a couple of things I want you to look at when we're doing this together, and that's that all the information that we've put in there, despite having spaces and new lines, we don't have any of that down here. This all appears as just one big chunk of text, and the reason for that is we have not told the browser how we want to display this information. So let's go ahead and start doing that. So if we look back, we have some bigger text here, we have some smaller text here, we have another type of heading, and then we have a list, and then more information here at the bottom. So let's get started on filling that out. Let me just close this for us. There we go. Okay. So we know that this information needs to be very big, and if you remember, there's a certain kind of tag that makes the text very big. I'll give you a second to try to see if you remember it. All right, so it's going to be the heading, version 1 of the heading. All right, and now we have our heading. So something about this tag is that the H stands for heading, which is essentially like a title. And then the 1 is the size of the heading that we're trying to give it. So 1 is the largest size. We can also have a size 2. We can have 3. And we can go all the way down to, I believe, 6. At which point it's not much bigger than the text that we have down there. So let's go ahead and put that back to 1. Great. So that's a good start. We have the heading down. Now we want to differentiate this line from everything else. So what we're going to do is we're going to give it a paragraph tag. All right, now we have it separated. So now we have that he's looking for his family, and then we have all the information underneath that. Great, that's good. Now let's go ahead and tackle the information. So we want to draw attention to this a little bit more. So let's go ahead and give it a heading tag, but I don't want it to be as big as the main heading, so let's go ahead and go H2. Nice. The next thing we have to tackle is the fact that our list isn't really a list. So the way that we're going to do that is we're going to add what's called an unordered list tag. And we're going to go ahead and indent that just so that looks a little bit better. There we go. All right, so you're probably thinking, okay, we have an unordered list, but this doesn't look like a list. So the reason for that is that the unordered list tells the browser everything inside of me is going to be in a list, but it doesn't tell the browser which items are their own parts of the list. So what that means is we know that all of this is part of a list, but we don't know where the cutoff is for each bullet point. Okay, so what we need to do is define these items as list items. There we go. All right, so now we have one list item. Let's go ahead and make sure the rest of them are also list items. Do a little copy paste, make this go a little bit faster. And there we go. Now we have a great unordered list. And if you're thinking, hey, unordered, is there an ordered version? Yes, there is. It's called OL, ordered list, and it gives you a numbered version instead of just the bullet points. But we're not really trying to count or list out a numbered version, so we're going to go ahead and keep that as an unordered list. Okay, so we're almost done. One more thing we want to do is make sure that the viewer knows that Benji wants to play. So let's go ahead and give that a heading as well, but not quite as big as the title and not quite as big as the information. So we're going to go ahead and make it H3. Okay, looking good. We're almost done. If you remember the image we were looking at before, there's one thing missing, and that is a horizontal line. So let's go ahead and add a horizontal line to divide the information. And we can do that with a self-contained tag. We don't need to close it. And there we go. So now we've successfully recreated what we were seeing here in the example. And you also should have a better understanding of the different types of simple tags, such as the heading tags or the unordered list tags. With that done, you can go ahead and move on to the challenge, and I'll see you again in HTML attributes.